You don't fight toxic people by becoming toxic yourself. You don't need to yell, scream, or play their games to win. You make them fear you by showing them one thing, that they cannot control you. And when they see that no matter what they say or do, you will not break, that's when their power begins to vanish. Toxic people feed on chaos. They thrive when you overreact, when you defend yourself too much, when you get emotional and lose your balance. That's their oxygen. Every time you argue endlessly or let them pull you into their drama, you're giving them exactly what they want. But when you stay calm, when you stay in control, they feel powerless. And that's how you win. Not by meeting their toxicity, but by rising above it with strength, self-control, and composure. Silence is one of your greatest weapons. The less you react, the more frustrated they become. They expect a fight, they expect you to argue, they expect you to break. But when you meet their provocation with calm stillness, you're saying, "You don't deserve my energy." And that silence, it unnerves them. It makes them realize you are not someone they can play with. And it's not just your words, it's your body language. How you carry yourself speaks volumes. Stand tall, keep your shoulders back, hold steady eye contact without aggression, without blinking first. Speak fewer words, but with clarity. Your presence alone can communicate more than an argument ever will. When you look composed, when you appear in control of yourself, you signal that you are not to be underestimated. Then comes boundaries, real, unapologetic boundaries. A toxic person will test you, push you, and see how far they can go. The most powerful thing you can do is say no firmly, without apology, without justification. Not angry, not emotional, just clear. No, that's it. Every time you hold that line, you prove you cannot be manipulated. And consistency is everything. The moment you bend or make excuses, they'll know they can find a crack. But when you stay consistent, they realize they are up against someone who cannot be broken. Detachment is another tool. The more you detach emotionally, the less they can affect you. They want to see you hurt. They want to see you react. But if you don't give them that satisfaction, they lose interest. You become boring to them. And that's when they start backing away, not because you fought harder, but because you refuse to play at all. Think about it. A boss tries to intimidate you, raising their voice to make you small. Instead of panicking, you pause, you breathe, you answer slowly, calmly. That calm unsettles them because they can't rattle you. Or a partner tries to guilt trip you into doing something you don't want. Instead of debating, you simply say, "That doesn't work for me." No drama, no anger, just strength. Or the so-called friend who makes little digs to bring you down. You don't react. You don't give them your energy. You look at them, give a small smile, and move on. And that reaction, or lack of it, shuts them down faster than any argument ever could. What toxic people really fear is not aggression. They expect aggression. They thrive on drama. What they fear is losing control. And when they realize you can't be shaken, when they see you won't give them what they want, that's when their grip over you disappears. That's when they begin to fear you, not because you fought them, but because you showed them you are untouchable. You don't fight toxic people by becoming toxic yourself. You don't need to lower yourself to their level. You don't need to shout or prove anything to them. The most powerful way to make them afraid of you is to show them something they cannot stand, that they have no control over you. The moment they realize that no matter what they do, you remain grounded, centered, and unshakable, their entire game falls apart. Because toxic people survive on control. They thrive when you lose yourself, when you give in, when you get pulled into their drama. But when you show them that you are untouchable, they are left powerless. Toxic people need your energy to survive. They need your reaction. They are fueled by drama, by arguments, by emotional chaos. When you explain yourself too much, when you raise your voice, when you feel the need to prove yourself, that's when they win. Because in those moments, you're not in control anymore. They are. Every outburst, every defensive word, every time you show them they got under your skin, you're feeding them exactly what they want. And this is where you need to shift the game. You stop feeding them. You starve them of what they crave most, your emotional energy. And when you do that, something incredible happens. Without you fighting, without you arguing, their power begins to dissolve. One of the most powerful tools you can use is silence. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strength. It is restraint. It is control. Toxic people expect you to react. They expect you to defend yourself. They expect you to argue back. But when you meet their poison with stillness, when you withhold your words and your energy, you're sending them a message stronger than anything you could say. You have no control over me. That silence makes them uncomfortable. It makes them question themselves. It makes them realize they cannot reach you. Your body language also plays a massive role. You don't need to speak volumes when your presence does it for you. Keep your shoulders relaxed, your posture open, your movements calm. Look them in the eye, but without aggression, steady, firm, and unshaken. Speak fewer words, but when you do, let them carry weight. The less you say, the more powerful you become, because your body is telling a story. I am in control. I am not intimidated. I am not moved by you. And that story is what makes them step back. Boundaries are another key part of your power, and the truth is, most people struggle with them because they feel guilty for saying no. Toxic people know this. That's why they push. That's why they test. But a boundary is not something you explain or apologize for. It's something you state, clearly and firmly. When you say no, it doesn't require a long explanation. It doesn't require you to soften it. Your no is enough. Every time you stand firm, every time you refuse to bend, you are proving you cannot be manipulated. And consistency is critical here. Because toxic people don't just test you once, they keep testing to see if they can break you. The moment you hold the line again and again, they realize they're up against someone who cannot be worn down. And here's another piece. Emotional detachment. You cannot give them the satisfaction of seeing you hurt. That's what they want. To see the pain on your face, to see your frustration, to know they got inside your head. But when you detach, when you refuse to show them that emotion, you take away their reward. You can still feel what you feel inside, but outwardly, you remain composed, collected, in control. And eventually, they'll stop trying, because there's nothing left for them to gain. Think about it in real life. A boss raises their voice, trying to intimidate you, expecting you to shrink. Instead, you pause. You take a breath, and you answer calmly, slowly, without rushing. That calm unsettles them, because they realize they can't rattle you. Or imagine a partner who uses guilt to control your decisions. Instead of defending yourself or falling into the trap of justification, you simply say, "That doesn't work for me." You don't argue, you don't explain, you just hold firm. That's real power. Or picture a friend who makes little cutting remarks, trying to get a reaction. Instead of snapping back, you give them a steady look, maybe even a small smile, and you move on. You deny them the drama they want, and that denial is more powerful than any comeback. Toxic people don't actually fear aggression. They expect aggression. They want the shouting, the fighting, the emotional storm, because in that storm, they know how to control you. What they truly fear is someone who cannot be moved, someone who refuses to give them what they want, someone who doesn't play their game. When you master silence, when you control your body language, when you enforce boundaries without apology, when you detach and stay consistent, that's when fear sets in. Not because you fought them harder, but because you showed them they don't matter enough to shake you. You don't beat toxic people by becoming like them. You don't outshout them. You don't outfight them. And you don't lower yourself into their chaos. The way you make them fear you is by showing them that no matter what they say, no matter what tricks they use, they cannot touch you. Their goal is always control. They want to see if they can push your buttons, if they can drag you into their storm. But when you stand firm, when you remain grounded, they start to see that they have no power over you. And that realization is what shakes them to their core. The first shift is understanding what they feed on. They thrive on reaction. Every time you over-explain yourself, raise your voice, or get visibly upset, You're giving them energy. You're giving them control of the moment. They want you to lose your composure because when you do, they feel stronger. That's why one of the most powerful strategies you can use is restraint. The less you give them, the weaker they become. You take away the very fuel that keeps them going. And silence, as simple as it sounds, is one of your most powerful weapons. Silence makes people uncomfortable, especially toxic ones. They want you to chase, to defend, to react. But when you pause, when you hold your ground and don't give them words back, it unsettles them. They start second-guessing themselves because they expected noise, and you gave them stillness. That stillness communicates something louder than words ever could. You don't have control over me. Silence is not weakness, it is command. Your body language tells its own story. Sometimes, you don't need to say much because the way you carry yourself speaks for you. Calm posture, shoulders relaxed, a steady, unwavering gaze. You don't fidget, you don't flinch, you don't show nervousness. You don't need to stare someone down aggressively, just hold their eyes with calm certainty. And when you do speak, use fewer words, but make them count. The combination of controlled body language and deliberate speech tells the other person, I am not moved by you. And that in itself is enough to shift the balance of power. Then there are boundaries. Toxic people test you over and over again. They want to know where your limits are, and more importantly, if they can break them. That's why your no has to mean something. Not a soft maybe, not a no. But let me explain, not something they can negotiate. A firm, unapologetic no. That's it. And the moment you deliver that boundary without apology, you create a line they cannot cross. The key is consistency. Because if you hold the line once, but break it the next time, they'll know they can keep pushing until you crack. The power lies in standing firm every single time, even when it feels easier to give in. Another crucial part of this is emotional detachment. Toxic people want to see you bleed emotionally. They want to see you upset, hurt, offended. They want proof that they got under your skin. But if you can learn to detach, if you can keep your composure even when you're feeling something inside, you rob them of that victory. You're no longer a source of their satisfaction. You might feel the anger, the sadness, the frustration, but outwardly, you remain steady. And in that steadiness, they see someone they cannot control. Now let's bring this into real life. Imagine a boss raising their voice, slamming their words down to intimidate you. Most people would shrink or get defensive. Instead, you breathe. You slow down. You answer calmly, without rushing. That calmness disarms them because the louder they get, the calmer you remain. They can't pull you into their storm. Or imagine a partner who uses guilt to try to manipulate you. Rather than arguing or defending, you simply say, that doesn't work for me. That's it. No debate, no justification, just a line in the sand. And the manipulative friend who constantly makes sly remarks, you don't take the bait. You look at them, hold eye contact, maybe even give a small smile, and you move the conversation on. And in doing so, you take the power out of their hands. What toxic people don't fear is aggression. They expect aggression. They want drama. They want yelling. They want chaos because that's their playground. What they truly fear is someone who doesn't give them any of that. Someone who refuses to react. Someone who remains unshaken no matter what's thrown their way. That's when they start to realize that they cannot win with you. And that's when the balance of power shifts. Not because you shouted louder, but because you showed them that nothing they do will move you. Toxic people don't actually fear your anger. They don't fear when you shout back or when you lose control. In fact, that's exactly what they want. They thrive on chaos. And the moment you meet them with aggression, you've stepped into their arena. You've given them the one thing they crave the most, proof that they can manipulate your emotions. That's not where your power lies. Real power comes from something far more unsettling to them, your calm. When you remain composed, when you don't react the way they expect, you disrupt their entire strategy. They want to provoke you, to pull you into a storm, to watch you unravel. But when you don't take the bait, when you stand there steady and unmoved, it shakes them because they've lost their grip. You're no longer playing their game. And toxic people don't know how to function without control. This is why silence works so powerfully. Most people panic in silence. They rush to fill it with words, with explanations, with apologies. Toxic people count on that. But when you withhold words, when you simply pause and let the silence hang, it forces them to sit in their own discomfort. They can't read you, they can't control you, and that lack of control makes them nervous. It's not about being cold or cruel, it's about being deliberate. Your silence is a message. You don't have access to me. Your presence alone can trigger this fear when you master your body language. Think about it. If you look rattled, if you fidget, if your tone becomes defensive, you're signaling weakness. But if you keep your shoulders back, your breathing steady, your voice calm, you project certainty. You're not meeting hostility with hostility. You're meeting it with control. And control, in their world, is dominance. You don't need to fight for respect. You show it in the way you carry yourself. Boundaries add another layer to this psychology. A toxic person is always testing the perimeter, always looking for cracks. If you fold once, they'll know exactly where to press next time. That's why a clear, unapologetic no carries such weight. You don't justify it, you don't decorate it with excuses. You keep it simple and firm. Every time you enforce a boundary, you're reminding them, you don't dictate the terms here. And when you repeat it consistently, they begin to recognize that they have no power to bend you. And perhaps the deepest part of this dynamic is emotional detachment. Toxic people thrive when they can see they've hurt you. That's the victory they're chasing. But when you don't give them that satisfaction, they are left empty-handed. You can feel whatever you feel on the inside, but on the outside, you remain steady. You don't flinch, you don't break, and you don't reward their behavior with your pain. And that is what unsettles them most. The realization that they cannot touch you where it matters. So the psychology of fear here isn't about making yourself bigger or louder than them. It isn't about dominating through force. It's about showing them, time and time again, that you're not someone who can be pulled into their chaos. The fear comes from their loss of control. It comes from the quiet recognition that no matter what they do, no matter how hard they push, they cannot bend you. And in that moment, they understand that the game is over, not because you fought them, but because you refused to play. Toxic people want you to believe they're stronger than you, smarter than you, and always one step ahead. But the truth is, they're not nearly as powerful as they appear. Their strength doesn't come from who they are. It comes from how much of yourself you hand over to them. The moment you give them your energy, your attention, or your emotions, you've stepped into their arena. And that is exactly what they want. They win the moment you lose your composure. But when you hold your ground, when you don't flinch, when you don't let them see you rattled, that's when everything changes. That's when the fear shifts to them. Silence, composure, and boundaries aren't just theories. They work in real life, and they work in some of the toughest environments. Imagine this. You're at work, and your boss tries to use intimidation as a tool. They raise their voice. They lean in. They try to make you feel small. Most people respond by either shrinking into silence out of fear or rushing into defensive explanations. But there's another way. You don't raise your voice back. You don't argue. Instead, you pause. You breathe. You speak calmly, slowly, and only when necessary. That steady composure unsettles them because they realize they can't pull you into their storm. The louder they become, the calmer you remain. And in that calm, you take back the power. Or think about a relationship. A partner who uses guilt as a weapon, saying things like, if you loved me, you'd do this, or you're making me feel like I don't matter. That's manipulation dressed as love, and it's effective if you rush to prove yourself, to argue, to apologize for something you didn't even do. But instead, imagine responding with a firm, steady voice. That doesn't work for me. No defense, no long explanation. Just a line. That response is powerful because it shows that their guilt tactics don't work on you. You didn't argue, you didn't collapse, you stayed rooted in your own worth. And when they see they can't bend you with guilt, they start to recognize that their control is slipping away. Even in friendships, the dynamic is the same. A so-called friend who hides their toxicity under jokes, little digs, and subtle insults. They make comments designed to chip away at your confidence while pretending it's all harmless. The trap is to snap back, defend yourself, or even laugh it off while quietly feeling wounded. But when you meet that behavior with stillness, when you look them directly in the eye, give a calm smile, and then move the conversation forward without acknowledging their jab, you rob them of what they wanted most, your reaction. You showed them they don't get access to your emotions. And that is far more powerful than clapping back or trading insults. Each of these situations proves one thing. You don't need to fight toxic people on their terms. You don't need to out-argue them, out-shout them, or convince them of your worth. Your strength comes from showing them that they cannot shake you, no matter how hard they push. And it's not a one-time thing. Toxic people will keep testing you. They'll circle back and look for weak spots. But every time you stand firm, every time you repeat that boundary, every time you respond with composure, you reinforce the message, you cannot control me. And here's what happens when you do this consistently. They start to retreat. They might push harder at first because they're used to getting a reaction from you. But when they finally see that your calm is not temporary, that it's who you are, they begin to pull back. They realize they cannot win, not because you fought harder, but because you refuse to enter the fight at all. And that's the moment the fear shifts. Real strength isn't about how loud you can be or how much you can fight back. It isn't about proving yourself in every confrontation or trying to outdo the people who try to bring you down. True strength is quieter, calmer, and far more powerful than that. It's the kind of strength that doesn't waver when someone tries to provoke you. It's the strength that refuses to let someone else control your emotions, your choices, or your sense of worth. When you master that level of control, you become untouchable, and toxic people know it. The reason this works is because toxic people need chaos. They feed off reactions. They look for signs that they've gotten to you, that they've pushed the right button. When you yell back, when you get defensive, when you try to explain yourself to them over and over again, you've given them exactly what they wanted. You've shown them that they have influence over you. But when you stay grounded, when your words are few and measured, when your body language stays calm, when your boundaries remain firm, they realize they don't have the power they thought they did. That realization unsettles them more than any angry response ever could. And it's not about shutting down your emotions. It's about not letting someone else decide when and how you show them. You can feel the frustration, you can feel the hurt, you can feel the anger. That's human. But toxic people don't get to see that part of you. They don't get access to your vulnerabilities. You control what you give them. You decide what part of yourself they're allowed to touch. And when they realize they can't make you break in public, they start to recognize you're operating at a level they can't reach. Think about what that does to the balance of power. Suddenly, they're not the ones in control anymore. They're not the ones dictating the terms of the interaction. You are. You control your energy, your reactions, your space. That calm presence becomes its own form of authority. And that's what toxic people fear, not because you threatened them, not because you overpowered them, but because you showed them you cannot be moved. Strength is not about revenge either. It's not about teaching them a lesson by hurting them the way they hurt you. The truth is, if you focus on revenge, you're still letting them control you. You're still giving them space in your mind. Real strength means you don't need to fight on their level. You don't need to prove yourself to someone who was never worthy of your energy in the first place. The most powerful statement you can make is to show them you're above the game entirely. When you carry yourself this way consistently, you build a reputation without even trying. People begin to notice that you don't get rattled easily, that you don't get dragged into drama, that you don't hand over your peace so freely. And the ones who are toxic will slowly pull back, because they know they can't get what they want from you. They'll move on to someone else who's easier to control. And the people who respect strength will be drawn to you, because they'll recognize the difference between false bravado and true composure. That's the takeaway here. Strength is not about noise. It's not about aggression. It's about being untouchable in the moments that matter most. It's about showing toxic people that no matter how they come at you, no matter how many times they test you, you are not someone who bends under pressure. And once they see that, once they understand that you can't be shaken, they lose the only thing they ever had over you, the illusion of control. The secret to making toxic people afraid of you is not in outsmarting them. out-shouting them, or out-maneuvering them. It is in never losing yourself in the process. Because the truth is, the battle was never about them. It was always about you. About whether you would hand over your peace, your self-control, your dignity, in exchange for proving a point. And the moment you understand that, you realize you've already been holding the power all along. You see, toxic people want you reactive. They want you off balance. They want you questioning yourself. The second you break character, the second you lose your composure, they feel they've won. But when you stay rooted, when your tone is steady, when your boundaries don't bend, when your emotions remain in your hands and not theirs, then suddenly the power shifts. They can no longer predict you. They can no longer control you. And that unpredictability is what creates fear in them. Because people who can't be manipulated, they're dangerous to manipulators. And I want you to remember something powerful. You don't have to meet force with force to be strong. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to prove your worth to someone who never valued it in the first place. Your strength is not in the noise you make. It's in the silence you master. It's in the stillness of knowing who you are and refusing to compromise that. That's what makes people back down, not because you threatened them, but because you showed them that nothing they do can move you from your center. When toxic people realize they cannot shake you, something shifts inside them. They may try harder at first, pushing, testing, probing for weakness. But when you respond the same way each time, calm, consistent, unbothered, they begin to see the truth. They have no power here, and that realization is what makes them retreat. Not because you fought them, but because you showed them you were never in the fight to begin with. You stood in your power, and that alone was enough. So carry this with you. The goal is never to destroy toxic people, or to become toxic yourself in trying to beat them. The goal is to rise so high above their games that they can't reach you anymore. To become so steady that their chaos looks small beside your calm. To be so sure of yourself that their tactics no longer land. That is the victory. That is what it means to win without ever throwing a punch. The secret to making toxic people afraid of you is simple. Don't lose yourself. The moment they see you cannot be shaken, you've already won. And that win is permanent because it comes from the one thing no one can take away from you: your self-control, your dignity, and your unshakable presence.